Welcome to another episode of the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenaz. Today is another segment of Making Sense with Gabriel Gaarden. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hi, Gabriel. Welcome back.
Hey, Nancy. Great to see you.
I have a question for you, as I always do. How about omega-3 fatty acids? Can you tell us about those?
I sure can. Omega-3s. So yeah, they omega-3s come from plants. They come from, or at least fish get them from algae and other little types of, green things that they eat in the ocean. And then to a certain degree, we convert them in our own bodies to these, from the shorter chain omega-3s to the longer chain, more active forms of omega-3. And so one of the omega-3 kind of precursors then that we can get from a plant-based diet is known as alpha-linolenic acid. That's ALA. And that's the kind of the omega-3 precursors. And then there's also the omega-6s, which are also essential fatty acids. And that word essential is important because there's a number of things that our body can kind of take other building blocks and put them together and make them. But when it comes to essential things in our diet, those are things that we have to get from food, right? So our bodies can't manufacture them from other things that are, coming in or that are already there. It has to come in through food. And so that's what the omegas are. They're essential fatty acids. So we have to consume them. And like I say, we have the omega-6s, we have the omega-3s. Omega-3s are the big ones because are kind of like the most important ones because those are converted to these two different forms of long chain omega-3s that I mentioned called EPA and DHA. And those are long words, but we just kind of paraphrase them as those shorter acronyms because they're easy to remember and they're easy to say. So EPA and DHA are super important, those omega-3s, for brain health and for cardiovascular health. So the health of our hearts, the health of our blood vessels, our vascular system. And so the omega-3 precursor, ALA, like I mentioned, alpha-linolenic acid, is super important because we convert ALA to both DHA and EPA in the body. And EPA and DHA are super important. And that conversion process is pretty slow, we don't convert it super readily, super quickly, super efficiently, but we don't need huge amounts of DHA and EPA in our body. And so even though the conversion process is kind of slow or it's not entirely super efficient, I think generally speaking, it's understood that if we're getting enough ALA in our diet, enough of that alpha-linolenic acid, and just so folks know, when we're thinking about ALA or omega-3 precursors, we're thinking about things like flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts are some of our biggest hitters or, our most rich sources of those omega-3s, as well as hemp seeds. And then you're going to get omega-3s in a bunch of other stuff too. Dark leafy greens are a great source, even berries, which we don't think of as having fat right off the top of our heads because, of course, omega-3s they're an essential fatty acid. It's a form of fat. Even berries are a good source. Now, of course, they're a very modest source. They don't have a ton of these things in them. But this is an important point for everybody to remember. Little bits of things add up when we're stacking them all together throughout the course of the day. So if we're eating some flax seeds or chia seeds, if we're eating some walnuts, some hemp seeds, those are our more significant sources of ALA, those omega-3 precursors. But then if we're also eating dark leafy greens like kale or collard greens or spinach or arugula, which have some omega-3s as well, and then we're eating things like berries, which also have omega-3s, even though the levels are smaller or more modest, when we're stacking all those things on top of each other throughout the course of a day, we're going to ensure that we get enough of that ALA. And then we convert that ALA, that alpha-linolenic acid, to DHA and EPA in the body. And I've seen some evidence that in some people for whom those conversion rates may be a little less efficient than average, or especially in older adults, because we tend to generally, our bodies just don't work as efficiently as we get older. And sometimes we have lower levels of the enzymes that help to catalyze or boost some of these reactions in the body, some of these conversions, like converting ALA to DHA and EPA, it may be a good idea to think about taking a DHA or EPA supplement as kind of an insurance policy. Right now, this isn't, I don't think, a requisite or like a requirement for everybody to do. But for certain folks, especially as they age, it might be a better idea to think about taking. And again, this is something that you can get. It doesn't have to be a fish oil. For us vegans, or for anybody really, even if they weren't vegan, I would still recommend they go for an algae based, right? So they use algae to derive those DHA and EPA compounds, those omega-3 compounds that are super important for our brain and our cardiovascular health. You get it all straight from the plants, because again, that's the original source in the first place anyway, that fish are getting it from. Go straight to the plant. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I hear the most efficient is to get it from the plants, because that's what fish get it from. So let's leave the fish away. Don't leave the fish alone and just go right for the algae and the plant-based omega-3s.
Yeah, go straight to the source, right? It's like, get rid of the middle, get rid of the middle fish, like the middle man or the middle person in this case, right? Why mess with a less efficient process? We don't have to kill fish and maim fish in the process and disturb or destroy the natural fish populations that we have in our oceans, which are being depleted at a very alarming rate. When we can go straight to the plant source. And of course, the plant source is cleaner, because we know that so many of these environmental toxins tend to do something that's called bioaccumulate as they go up the food chain. And so as a tiny fish eats some of that algae and phytoplankton and all these other things, these small plants and smaller fish get eaten by larger fish and then even bigger fish, that a lot of these toxins like mercury and other heavy metals, these compounds that are known as PCBs, which are super toxic. All of these things bioaccumulate as they move up the food chain. And then we tend to eat the fish that are bigger, that have more of these toxins in them. We may get our fish oil from a lot of these larger fish. And so that's something we can avoid by just going straight to the source. It's much cleaner. It's going to be much lower in any levels of heavy metals and other environmental toxins and pollutants. And then we're not disturbing the health of the fish, and we're not destroying our fish populations by going straight to the source. And so people can just find an algae-based DHA or EPA supplement. Now, like I say, that's not an absolute requirement. For many healthy people, I think there's a good chance that they're going to convert enough of the ALA that you get in some of those, seeds that I mentioned, nuts, especially walnuts, and then dark leafy greens and berries and things like that.
Sea vegetables, right?
Yes, sea vegetables as well. We just want to be careful with certain sea vegetables, because some of them are so high in iodine that we can get, iodine is a nutrient of concern on vegan diets. It's something that we want to make sure we're getting enough of. And sea vegetables are our best source of iodine on the planet, and certainly going to be healthier than just consuming loads of iodized salt. Iodized salt is good for one reason, because it's going to make sure people get some iodine. But the salt portion of iodized salt is very unhealthy if we get it in excess. And most Americans are getting way more salt than they need. And it's one of the key risk factors for high blood pressure, which is one of the key risk factors, the primary risk factor for heart disease and stroke. And that's the number one killer of Americans, right? It's killing more people than anything else around. And so we want to get our salt consumption down. And yes, sea vegetables are great. But there's certain sea vegetables that people want to watch out for in terms of just not eating them every day or not eating too much of them. I recommend folks go to nutritionfacts.org, type in iodine, type in sea vegetables, type in kelp, type in dulse, some of these popular vegetables, and just find out, because there's great resources there that are all evidence-based, really high quality information, where you'll find out which sea vegetables you might want to watch out for when it comes to getting too much iodine. Because yes, we want to avoid getting too little is a problem, but too much can also be a problem. And so something to look out for. But yes, sea vegetables are a great solution to get enough iodine, to get some of those good, like you say, omega-3 precursors and omega-3 fats. And of course, going straight to the source. We don't need to go through the fish.
Awesome. Gabriel, thank you for joining us on another episode of Making Sense with Gabriel.
Great to be here, Nancy. Thank you for having me.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Remember to check out our website, follow us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you got a pulse, you got a purpose. Live vegan.